Rafe Heydel-Mankoo is here. Sex is a fact of biology, it says on the front page of the Daily Mail. I mean, it's taken them a long time to get to this point, but they've sort of slowly dragged themselves to it, haven't they?
Yeah, this actually makes me angry. This is one of the times I've become angry during this election campaign, because now we have a sort of as a manifesto promise that they're going to actually deal with the Equality Act or change part of it. Well, you know, Rishi Sunak was promising to do stuff with the Equality Act before he became Prime Minister.
Yes.
And what I find a complete betrayal of the British people is the Tory party giving up on 8 months more of government when they could easily have done this. They had 8 months left. And it seems to me that they're doing damage limitation by calling this election early to save a few of their friends' seats in Parliament. That was the logic behind it.
Right.
Meanwhile, they're leaving the rest of the Tory voters out to dry, because so much decent Conservative legislation, like actually abolishing the Equality Act, could have been put forward over the next 8 months, because it's inevitable that the Labour Party is going to win.
Right.
The Conservatives know that. So rather than just trying to save a few seats, they should have put the interests of the British people first and enact decent, proper legislation and try as much as they can to hamstring the Labour Party.
But isn't that part of the problem with long recess they have over summer, though? Because, I mean, even if they hadn't called an election for July the 4th, which obviously they did relatively surprisingly just 2 weeks ago, there wouldn't be much time for parliamentary business between now and, say, September anyway. And then they come back from a long summer holiday, and I know that MPs will say, oh, yeah, but we're not just on holiday, we do constituency work, I get that. But nevertheless, they come back, and then they take another month off to go and do Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem, whatever party conferences.
But repealing a legislation is much easier than creating new legislation, because we have to go through the new legislation. But this would simply be a simple statement.
Well, I mean, they could have spent the time that they spent on the smoking bill, for example, doing something interesting, or they could have spent the time on something other than the Rwanda bill, going backwards and forwards between the House of Lords and the House of Commons, getting nowhere.
But the Rwanda bill would have gone somewhere had it not been for things like the Human Rights Act. Things, you know, and so it's these pieces of legislation that have hamstrung the Tory party and have prevented it from actually getting ahead with its agenda. It's been the NGOs, it's been the lawyers, it's been the courts, you know, tying up the governments because of these acts brought in by Labour. And I don't understand, you know, Gordon Brown brought in the Equality Act in order to entrench the Labour Party's progressive equity type of ideology, and since then it's always used by academics, by NGOs, and by HR departments. Oh, we have to go by the Equality Act, even though they don't know what's in the Equality Act.
And then it's used by the people who want to change things over the diversity and inclusion policies in various companies as well. Let's talk about a couple of other stories. D-Day coming up this week, the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings. Lots going on in Portsmouth and other parts of the world, but we're seeing a couple of stories today. One, that recruitment is at an all-time low for all of the armed forces, and similarly also there's a call to use Spitfires in the D-Day commemorations, which at the moment they're going to be banned from doing because of that crash the other day.
That's right. I mean, it would really be a huge shame if Spitfires weren't actually taking part in this. You know, we're so used to now, whenever there's a big royal event, a ceremonial event, you have the Battle of Britain Memorial flight, and everyone waits to see two things. The Lancaster bombers, there are only two Lancasters in the world, one in Canada, one here, that are still flyworthy, but then the Spitfires, and the crowd always erupts.
Which makes a fantastic noise, doesn't it?
It's absolutely brilliant, you know, and there are only 60 Spitfires left in working order. And one of the chaps who works on these planes has said, if you don't keep them flying, they will cease to work. So they need to be up and about and seeing things. So I really do.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it, that it's probably the Health and Safety Brigade who are saying, oh no, we can't use any Spitfires, which were used during a war. Which it was quite dangerous as well to fly a Spitfire, because it might get shot down.
And the other thing, of course, is, you're quite right, there's a big recruitment crisis. I think 25, a quarter or 28% of the Special Forces recruitment has declined. And people are
some of the levels are down by 50%. I mean, it's quite a crisis for them, because, you know, we had the national service conversation the other week about whether, you know, people should be forced to go and do some military service. But also, when we had a sort of a poll on it, a lot of young people said, well, I'm not interested in fighting for my country, thanks. Don't want to.
This is a huge problem we have here, of course, because we have the most left-wing youth in history. But of course, because of this, the army are talking about lowering standards.
Yes, it's very tricky,
including accepting people with asthma and so forth. Now,
Right.
call me old-fashioned.
Yeah.
I don't want an asthmatic
No.
going up trying to go storming the beaches.
No. And these are the same people, of course, who told us years ago, before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that future battlegrounds will no longer be physical; they'll just be cyber battlegrounds, and so we don't really need people to be physically fit because you can sit behind a computer and fight anyone. Well, look what's happened now. Now they're all going, oops! It looks as though actually proper real life battles are the thing, and we don't have enough people to fight them.
Yeah, the lack of foresight here has been amazing to behold. But it's not rocket science. If you want to increase recruitment, stop targeting women and ethnic minorities where we know that very few of them are actually interested.
Yeah.
And stop demonising white working class men who
Yes.
are actually the main demographic who are attracted to the army.
Yeah.
And once you actually try to, because right now there's no incentive for them to fight for a nation when they think the nation doesn't appreciate them.
No.
In fact, if anything, derides them and accuses them of white privilege and systemic racism. So it's quite simple. Just get back to old-fashioned, your country needs you.
Common sense.
Decent adverts showing what a good life you can have in the army. Because, I've got a friend of mine who was a very poor guy in America, in Carolina, got a scholarship, went to university, went to the military academy, is now a colonel in the Air Force. For many people, the army has been a great way
That's been a
for
great
them to advance their lives
Absolutely.
and their careers. And we know that white working class boys are the most disadvantaged group in society, and the army is an excellent way for many of them to actually improve their lot in life.
It absolutely is. Speaking of which, Britons have become side hustle specialists, according to the Times. Piece in the Times that says as many as 47% of people across the nation are actually admitting to having some kind of second income. With a further 10% actively searching for one. So an awful lot of people who are working from home are doing it because they can run a business as well.
Does that include appearing on radio shows?
I think it does, actually. I think
yes.
you could.
This is a side hustle.
If this is a side hustle for you, well done. I mean, for me, it's all I've got, But I think it's true. More and more people are sort of finding ways of reselling things that they bought before, or upcycling things, and then finding actually there's a bit lucrative money. But Airbnb is another thing that people are doing, making an absolute fortune.
Yeah, I mean it's a sad situation
it's
we're
no
in
bad
now, where
thing, is
people. It's not a bad thing necessarily, but I think it's a sad situation. People need to do that and feel compelled to do it because they aren't getting the income streams that their parents' generation did.
Or maybe they're paying more tax than they used to.
Well, and rents are far higher. Trying to save for a deposit on your house. I mean, the thing is, life is a lot more expensive now than it ever was before. But it does show how ingenious people are, and young people are making something on average. Those who do this are making about £600 a month. So it is something which is quite a good something to get into, especially if you're a student and you've got student debt as well to deal with.
Absolutely. Now, this will probably wind you up as well. Campbell College in East Belfast is one of the places in the country, that's in Northern Ireland, of course, where you can do skateboarding as a GCSE. Which I suppose, if you're that sort of age and you are skateboarding, it doesn't. These kind of things used to annoy me, but actually it doesn't annoy me as much as it used to.
What's the examination? Is there a written exam for skateboarding?
I think it is. I think there was nothing too challenging. There was practical sets as well as theoretical sets. I suppose a bit like driving. And nothing too challenging, says one person who's studying the course at the age of 14. Ollies, shove-its and dropping. An ollie apparently is a jump caused by the striking of the tail of the board into the ground. A shove-it is a 180-degree jump without the tail hitting the ground, and dropping is entering the ramp from the top.
I'm sorry, but
I actually know a bit about this because one of my kids is a big skateboarder.
We have a skills crisis in this country, and you do not solve a skills crisis by having skateboarding lessons as a GCSE offering.
No.
I just did a lecture recently on how to reform the education system, and I was saying, we need to make history teaching compulsory till the age of 16, because in Europe they have it till 16. We have, at the age of 14 you can drop it, and people don't know anything about the history of their country. There are so many decent things that need to be done to improve the education levels of our children, but skateboarding, I fear, isn't one of them.
Skateboarding may not be one of them. Rafe, good to see you. Thank you very
so
much
much
indeed.